The noise of the world grated on me like sandpaper on raw skin. Not people, exactly, but everything they produced. The symphony of modern existence, with its ringing phones, urgent emails, impromptu meetings, keyboard clatter, and mindless office chatter. All of it formed an impenetrable barrier between me and my true passion. The archive. More specifically, the forgotten sub-basements where true history resided. Not the sanitized public-facing museum of remembrance, but the underbelly, where cool, dry air carried the comforting scent of aged paper and settled dust. Under the harsh glare of a single caged bulb that never seemed to dim, I found my treasures. Not presidential proclamations or nation-altering treaties, but history's fragments. Grocery lists tucked into ledgers, hasty notes scrawled on tax forms. Awkward photographs of barely documented lives. These forgotten souls' footnotes to humanity's grand narrative inspired a fierce, almost paternal devotion in me. My life's work, my obsession, was the compendium of the unremembered. Not some soulless digital database, but a physical monument. Thousands of meticulously cross-referenced index cards in my precise handwriting, documenting these forgotten lives. The third baker on Elm Street who briefly owned a cat named Bartholomew. The woman who left a single poem pressed between pages of a discarded novel. The child who drew an unsettlingly detailed map on a utility bill. These were my people. I felt kinship in their erasure from history's pages. I longed to weave their thin threads into a tapestry of human experience. And I needed just one thing. Time. Uninterrupted, boundless time. If only, I'd whisper to the silent shelves, if only I had time enough. The day everything changed began ordinarily. The usual email deluge, forced breakroom pleasantries, the city's persistent hum above. After lunch I retreated to my sanctuary, the heavy steel door clanging shut behind me with comforting finality. I was examining records from a defunct orphanage, hunting for traces of the child who drew that mysterious map. The first warning was a low, resonant groan from the building's very foundations. Deeper than settling pipes or aging concrete. It vibrated through the floor, up my legs, into my teeth. I glanced up, watching dust motes dance in the light. Then came the apocalyptic sound. Metal tearing, concrete splintering, a deafening roar. Debris rained down as instinct sent me diving beneath my solid oak desk. I squeezed my eyes shut, covering my head as destruction thundered around me. Then abruptly silence fell. Not archive silence, which was merely the absence of loud noise. This was profound. Absolute silence, a silence that felt final. I waited, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I tasted dust, felt grit between my teeth. I waited for sirens, shouts, rescue workers. Nothing came. Carefully I crawled from beneath the desk. Dust hung suspended in light beams from the still functioning bulb. A massive section of ceiling had collapsed, blocking the main aisle with twisted rebar, concrete chunks, and mangled ventilation ducts. I scrambled over the debris, hands scraping against jagged edges, and reached the steel door. I pulled the handle. It didn't budge. I pulled harder, throwing my weight against it. The frame had warped, sealing the heavy door shut. I was trapped. Panic flared hot in my chest. I pounded the door, shouting until my voice cracked. Only silence answered. After what seemed like hours, I slid to the floor, back against cold steel, gasping for breath. Despair washed over me, cold and deep. I was alone, buried, forgotten, just like those I studied. As terror receded, another feeling surfaced, quiet, insidious, utterly intoxicating. And that feeling was exhilaration. I was completely, utterly alone. No meetings, no emails, no interruptions. The dusty, silent space stretched before me. Shelves stood intact, thousands of documents waiting. My desk remained miraculously unharmed. The single bulb cast its steady light. I had time. The thought settled in my mind, warm and comforting. Time, all the time in the world. What I discovered next seemed too perfect to be coincidence. A reinforced room containing years of preserved food, bottled water, a chemical toilet, sturdy cot, and functioning ventilation system, an old fallout shelter, forgotten but intact. I could do more than survive. I could work. My days merged with nights. I lost track of time almost immediately. My life became the archive's rhythm. Wake, eat meager rations. Work, drink, work. Sleep when exhaustion claimed me. Wake again, work more. The compendium grew with astonishing speed. I felt peace, a profound contentment I'd never imagined possible, surrounded by my silent companions, building my monument to their fleeting existence. The silence transformed from an absence into a presence. A vast ocean in which I floated, anchored only by rustling paper and my scratching pen. Initially comforting. After weeks, or was it months, it began pressing inward, growing heavy, expectant. I started talking aloud to myself, narrating discoveries. Thomas Abernathy, haberdasher, 1892, died of consumption, leaving behind a collection of porcelain dolls. Fascinating. I'd read passages from letters and diaries, giving voice to the long dead. Then I began addressing the documents directly. So, Eleanor, your husband was lost at sea in 21. But this manifest lists him arriving in New York in 23. What happened to him in between? I'd pause, listening to profound silence, imagining responses, creating narratives around sparse facts. It felt less lonely. The first hint something was wrong came unexpectedly. I was examining a traveling salesman's file from the 1930s. I distinctly remembered reading about his wife and 2 daughters the previous day, a deal humanizing the dry sales reports. I reached for the document again, a faded letter to a supplier. I scanned the final paragraph where the personal note had been. It wasn't there. The letter ended abruptly after business details. Confused, I pulled my index card. Wife and 2 daughters mentioned in letter to Miller and Sons. October 14th, 1937. I checked the letter again. October 14th, 1937, Miller and Sons. The letter was correct, but the family mention had vanished. Unease jolted through me. Had I dreamt it? Hallucinated? No, I was certain. I remembered the brief glimpse into family life amid mundane records. I checked cross-references on the index card. They pointed only to sales reports. No family mentioned anywhere. Fatigue, I told myself. Isolation affecting me. I must have mixed up files. I annotated the index card, questioning the family detail, but unease lingered. And the next day, it happened again. I was verifying a birth date in a 1901 census. I'd recorded April 12, 1875. Looking at the census page again, the date clearly read, April 12, 1878. I stared at it, then at my index card. I distinctly remembered seeing 1875. I never made such mistakes. Precision defined my work. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I pulled related documents, a marriage certificate, death record. Both aligned with 1878. Where had I gotten 1875? I could almost visualize the number on the census page. I began checking previously processed documents. The baker's cat Bartholomew. Now the document mentioned a small, yapping dog. The woman's unpublished poem. Now a child's drawing of a lopsided house. The child's strange map. Still there, but the lines had shifted. Landmarks changed, depicting somewhere subtly, terrifyingly different. It wasn't fatigue or mixed files. The documents weren't physically changing. Same ink, same paper. The information itself was mutable. Facts dissolving and reforming like mist under a capricious sun. My entire system, my life's purpose, depended on history's permanence. But the foundation beneath me was crumbling. My sanity, built on verifiable data's solid rock, was fracturing. I tried fighting back. I'd read a passage, memorize it instantly, then look away, repeating information fiercely in my mind. Then I'd look back, heart pounding, praying for consistency. Sometimes, blessedly, it matched. A brief reprieve, a fragile anchor in the swirling chaos. More often it didn't. Words different, dates altered, names changed, details added or removed. I kept active documents in a pile, refusing to file them, staring for hours as if willpower alone could force consistency. I'd compare them to notes, to index cards that now recorded not just history, but its terrifying instability. My notes filled with question marks, cross-outs, frantic annotations. Was cat, now dog. Birth date 1875, now 1878. The inconsistencies multiplied like malignant cells in the dusty air. The archive wasn't just forgotten lives, it was a living entity whispering lies and reveling in contradiction. The silence, once my sanctuary, became terror. No longer empty, but full of shifting truths and altered histories. I started seeing things peripherally, fleeting shapes between aisles, shadows too deep, too solid. Were they the unremembered, angered by my failure to fix their stories? Or manifestations of the archive itself, physical embodiments of its contained chaos? I abandoned the compendium. What was the point? How build a compendium of truth when truth itself was fluid mockery? Index cards, once symbols of purpose, became accusations, testaments to failure. I began wandering aisles, pulling random documents, heart pounding with dread and perverse curiosity. What new horror would each page reveal? What impossible reality would scream from the ink? A soldier's letter describing a battle won, placed beside another document stating he died in that battle, which according to a third document never happened at all. A woman's diary mourning her husband's death in a fire, next to a newspaper announcing his triumphant return from voyage. The archive became a kaleidoscope of conflicting pasts, each asserting momentary reality before dissolving into another. I started destroying pages, screaming at shelves. Stop it! Tell me the truth! What is the truth? I'd tear pages, throw them down, watch dust settle on ink, stubbornly holding its latest lie. Time lost all meaning in this unchanging tomb of shifting realities. My clothes became rags, body gaunt, hair and beard matted. I stopped eating, forgot to drink water. Existence reduced to base survival and the soul-destroying terror of the archive's mutability. I huddled in corners, rocking back and forth, eyes unseeing, or crawled through aisles, fingers trailing over book spines and box edges, searching for solid ground in liquid history. One day or night, it no longer mattered. I found myself before a shelf I'd avoided for weeks. A small wooden box I remembered containing photographs from an asylum. With trembling hands, I opened it, knowing I shouldn't, but unable to resist. Inside was a single photograph, face down. I turned it over. It was me, not as I was now, but as I had been when I first entered the archive. Neat appearance, clear eyes, precise handwriting on the notation. According to the date on the back, the photo was taken in 1937. Impossible. I dropped it, backing away. When I gathered courage to look again, it showed a different man entirely. Someone I'd never seen before. The date now read 1964. I screamed until my voice gave out. Years later, a structural assessment team finally reached the collapsed sub-basement. They dug through debris, expecting a skeleton. They found me instead, barely alive, a living ghost, amidst my obsession's ruin. Curled fetally, surrounded by shredded paper and thousands of index cards. Many torn, others covered in frantic, illegible scrawl bearing no resemblance to my formerly neat hand. I didn't acknowledge the rescuers. I didn't even see them. My sunken eyes stared past them into unseen distance. I muttered continuously, voice a dry rasp, not about the people I'd tried to remember, not about lost time, but about the archive itself. It breathes, I whispered, barely audible. It shifts. It remembers everything, but everything it remembers is wrong, and I have all the time in the world to watch it forget, again, and again, and again. I had found my time enough at last, but in that time, Surrounded by my singular desires object, I discovered horror greater than any interruption or loneliness. The horror of reality refusing to hold still, a past that was a perpetual malicious lie, and a mind shattered, trying to grasp it. The doctors say I'm improving. They've moved me to a private room with large windows. Sunlight streams in, warm and reassuring. My therapist says confronting trauma is essential to recovery, so I've started keeping a journal, detailed, precise notes on my daily experiences. Yesterday I reviewed my first entry. The date was wrong. The doctor's name had changed. The window I described faced east, not west. And no one believes me. Sweet dreams.